Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with us, I'm Elisa Mosley, and I'm part of a campus reading community that we started at Jackson State last year, sparked by our interim president, Leslie McLemore, who suggested we ought to be reading all the time, and this was great. And it's just taken a life of its own. And tonight was so special for me, and I was just talking to Dr. Robert Luckett, that's going to lead our panel. Dr. Luckett told me that he had been here for 3 years. I thought it was much longer. I said, I was on the search committee that brought him to Jackson State, and I just can't believe it, because in the short time that he's been the director of the Margaret Walker Center, we have a new brand, we have some fantastic speakers coming annually, and I was telling him between NWC, Hamer, and the veterans, I mean, there's something always going on, and it's that kind of excitement and fever on the campus that takes us to another level in terms of learning. And this is the kind of thing that I had when I was in school, and I'm just so excited that we have decided to keep this thing going, this kind of interaction and activity. We have, this is our third book, and so I will yield the floor to Dr. Luckett, who will introduce his panel. And tonight's book, Ann Moody's Coming of Age in Mississippi, for those of you who have read it, are in the process of reading it, are trying to find out if you want to start reading it, you are going to love this piece. This work is fantastic. So with that, I will ask if you will please join me in welcoming Dr. Luckett.
As director of the Margaret Walker Center, it's my great pleasure to get to participate in public programming like this with our great partners, the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. I really want to salute them and the work they're doing, especially the staff, Keith McMillan, Dr. McLemore. You got great people working for you, and y'all are doing fantastic stuff. I would also encourage you, I know there'll probably be a plug for this later, Thursday night at 6:30, there will be the Medgar Evers Baker Civil Rights Lecture Series happening at the Masonic Temple on Lynch Street, another program that is spearheaded by the Hamer Institute that we're happy through the Margaret Walker Center to be able to participate in it and partner with the veterans and with Hamer. Ann Moody's Coming of Age in Mississippi is a very special book. I know probably most of you here have read it or have begun reading it, and it has impacted you deeply. It was one of the books that made me want to become a civil rights historian. And I have the great pleasure of teaching African American history, and before I even knew that I was going to be leading this panel discussion today, Ann Moody's Coming of Age in Mississippi was already in my syllabus for my students this semester, and they are reading it as we speak. When I was preparing to take my comprehensive exams at the University of Georgia for my doctorate degree, my major advisor asked me in my oral exams if I was going to assign one book on the civil rights movement that was absolutely must reading to my students one day. What would I assign? And I picked Coming of Age in Mississippi, Moody's classic autobiography. So that's to say, it's my great pleasure to lead this discussion tonight and be a part of this this roundtable. And I plan primarily to step out of the way and let the people who are on our panel have their say and engage all of you in dialogue and discussion tonight. It's my great pleasure to introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to invite the esteemed Mr. John Garner to come up and join us here. Mr. Garner is a retired professor of physics at Tuloo College and civil rights activist, and knew Ann Moody personally, and I'm sure we will all gain much from his perspective on the book and on Ann Moody. He's been able.
Oh, you all did? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I think I can make it.
Okay.
We also have joining us tonight a JSU graduate student in political science, Jalissa Jordan. I'd like to ask her to come up and join us, offering us a student's perspective of Ann Moody's Coming of Age in Mississippi. And for those of you who were with us this afternoon and had the pleasure of seeing the documentary film Separate but Equal,
I'm sorry.
my notes. For those of you who had the great pleasure of joining us today at lunchtime and seeing the beautiful documentary Separate But Equal, we are very pleased to have the award-winning documentary filmmaker Sean Wilson to join us for our dialogue tonight. Sean. I would like to recognize our esteemed guests in the audience. We do have our immediate past interim president, Dr. Leslie McLemore, director of the Veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement, Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, I'm sorry, Les, former board member of the Veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement, but also our current president, Dr. Carolyn Myers, is in attendance, and I really appreciate your presence. Thank you, Dr. Myers, for being here tonight. Without further ado, I want to get the conversation started. I'm going to come over here a little bit closer so that we're not quite so spread out. I guess, you know, fundamentally, the first place to start, and I think I want to start with Mr. Garner. How did Ann Moody and your relationship with her impact you personally and reading Coming of Age in Mississippi?
I'm gonna cry. I've read it. And was really dedicated movement. She put her life in it. And as you get to the end of the book, I read it again this afternoon, I was struck with how it took her life away, how exhausted she was. I don't know if you've gotten there yet, but as you read it, there's one time, she's just so overwhelmed with her helplessness and her powerlessness and the killing. I was just reading this article about 1963. 12th June, Medgar was killed. He's the one that hurt me the most. And on her birthday, on the 15th of September, the bombing of the church in Birmingham, 4 young, beautiful girls killed. Then, November 22nd, the same year, President Kennedy was assassinated. Then, her uncle was, killed, his face blown off by a shotgun blast down near someplace near Centerville. 4 deaths, well, four incidents. I guess 1 plus 4 plus 1 plus 1, that makes what, 7? Seven people killed in that short period of time, and the impact it had on her and her efforts in Canton and her feeling of helplessness, the police, the repression, what she viewed as the apathy of the Negroes, as they were called in those days. She just took everything out of her. Toward the end of the book, she got a little bit of energy back, maybe. She graduated from Tuloo in May of that year. And at the end of the book, she's jumping on a bus to go to Washington. I've talked to Ed King, I've tried to reach John Salter. Nobody quite knows where she is now. She's married, she spent some time in Europe, she came back, she had a son. But I talked to Mamie Chin last night. Those of you who read the book, you know the Chins are in that last chapter, particularly, or some of those last chapters on the movement, and how important they were to the movement in Canton. How they were really the only family that stood up for the suffering they got, and how much economic deprivation there was, and the CO was in jail on a chain gang. And my impression of her, which she was in the end, she kind of was defeated, felt helpless. Toward the end of the book, there are places where she just blacks out. I think when Kennedy was assassinated, you know, she was working in a restaurant and she just kind of blacked out and woke up someplace. Somebody holding a towel over her. She was in bed for hours. So that's my impression of Annie.
Sean, how about you?
Well, I will say that I guess I was most taken by her commitment to the movement. Something, you know, as you've said so eloquently, that she felt powerless over in the end, and sort of just her sense of surrender. So I would say overall, it was just a moving sort of testimonial to the human spirit and what she believed in, and how her convictions, how much she was willing to lose for something she strongly believed in.
Jalissa?
For me, the book gave me an insight into the cultivation of an activist. It gave me her struggles, her joy, her happiness, her pride, her disparities. It gave me all of those issues all in one when she was talking about being prom queen and things like that. And it kind of answered the question of how can people not become activists? Because in a way she painted a picture of something that was normal. Their way of living had became normal, and she kind of explained it in a way. I don't know if that was her intentions, but that's what I got out of the book, is an explanation of that environment, that society, that social culture for me. That's what I got out of the book.
Well, I guess building on that, I'd like to ask you, we can come back in maybe reverse order here. As a student and a young person, you know, Ann Moody was your age when she's doing these things. And for the young people on this campus, what's the message to you and to them, and why? I know this is a difficult question to get at, but where is the activism in our young people?
I want to say it's lost because we fail to connect the dots between yesterday, yesteryear, and today. We fail to see how the civil rights movement is still a movement that still needs to take place today. We still don't have education. We still don't have proper food. Those issues are still here today. And I believe as youth today, we've come to this privilege. We're privileged. I can go to any school I want to now, so it's equal. Equality is here. And so why struggle? Why fight for someone else? This individualism has seeped into our own racial community, thus causing us to divide and not coming together to form a movement that would be applicable to the issues that we're facing today.
I'm still thinking about it.
Oh, I got a microphone. I have a microphone over here, don't I? Yes, apathy is here. In the days that we see in '63 and earlier in Annie's life, there was apathy, but I think it was based on fear. It was based on fear, and it was based on economic deprivation. You know, Annie talks in the book about how Madison County had about the African Americans own almost 40% of the land. And you would think they would be independent, but because of the system, which I don't understand, they could only get a small fraction of that land into cotton. It was allocated and it went to the white folks. So they struggled economically. They were continually in debt. There was a lot of pressure on them. If they did something in the movement, what happened? They lost their job. They couldn't get loans. Their history had been that they would get a loan to put the crop in, and then when the crop came, they would pay back the loan. Without the loans, they couldn't put the crops in. So, in a sense, there was apathy, but in another sense, it was so repressive. It's just hard for you, and it's hard for me to understand or to comprehend the degree of control that the whites had. through economics, through killings, you know, through violence. That's the way they did it. And I can't criticize the people of that day too much for being afraid. And I can't criticize the Uncle Toms. When I was young, boy, I could land in them Uncle Toms, them preachers, them teachers who wouldn't get involved in the movement. They had economic pressures on them. If they got involved in the movement, they're likely to lose their job. And then what happens? Now, what's going on today? I'm almost more depressed over apathy today than I was then. I was just talking to Dr. McLemore about this a little bit. I'm working right now on 2 issues, and these are examples of how you might get involved. One is voter ID. Now this is a I can't remember what it, Proposition 27. What does it mean? You got to have an ID to vote in the future, not now. I cannot for the life of me figure out how they can do that without discriminating against poor folks. You got to get an ID, and the state says they're going to be free, but my understanding is you have to buy a birth certificate. You have to have a birth certificate to get the voter ID, and the birth certificates cost money. And you got a lot of effort. You got to go someplace. You got to have a car. You need a car. You need transportation. These are not easy things for poor people to have. There are a lot of poor people who live within a few miles of themselves and stay there. They don't get out of that inner circle. And as long as their polling place is close, they have somewhat of an opportunity to vote. They still got to register and so on. But that's one thing that really concerns me. Another area is charter schools. You know, this is like the private academies all over again. Only this time they're going to use state money to fund them. That's what I'm afraid of. So those are 2 issues where even though you can go to Ole Miss, you can go to wherever else you want to in the state in terms of being a student, and you can ignore your brothers and sisters. And I talking to somebody just today, he said it's changed from racial segregation to economic segregation. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Now there's a lot of racial segregation in too, because a lot of African Americans are darn poor. But these issues apparently to you folks, to you young folks, they seem so remote maybe. I mean, I was up in the legislature today trying to learn about these bills. I was showing them, unless I have a copy of one of them in my sack over there. It's only 65 pages long. You know, a long paper too. So there's a lot of details there. But hey folks, this stuff's going to have an impact, and if you wait until the impact comes, it's too late. In my view, if you wait until the bill is here, if you wait until the charter schools are here, if you wait until voter ID has been passed, then there's hell to pay. So I think you need to get involved.
Sean?
Well, I agree with what the 2 of you have said. But in defense of young people today, I just think by nature, you are being born African American, you are born an activist. It's a privilege to be able to study at a university today. And I think it's the activist spirit that's gotten these kids, these students here today. So I think the very nature of being in a university, having the privilege to study higher ed, is the activist spirit in nature. And I think we just focus on too much of the doom and gloom. I think we need to, and this is just me personally, I think we need to put our efforts into what's working for us. I look around this campus and it is absolutely amazing from what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's to be applauded. We're doing something right. And I think I was talking about this today. It's the simple law of attraction. Like if we truly focus on this is going wrong, that's going wrong, negative, we will be caught in that fight. I mean, like Mother Teresa said, a war on anything, don't invite me to it. If it's a peace rally, I'll be there. But a war by nature is negative and a fight. I think we should truly in the activist spirit, look at what we're doing right and build on that. And I don't know much about the charter schools. I'm from New York. I don't know how the system's going to work here, but I will say this. What I've seen of Mississippi, the schools are already segregated. If black students have any opportunity to get money and build schools that they want to build for themselves, I say go for it. Because by nature, most white kids in the state of Mississippi are already in private schools. So I say if there's any opportunity for a black parent, a black student, a black principal to have an opportunity to take some of the state's money and build their own curriculum, I say take it as an opportunity for some change that could possibly work for you.
Well, I say amen to that.
Yeah, I'm saying it's already segregated. I mean, most white kids in this school are paying to go to a private school anyway.
Yeah.
I say that what you hit on is right. Now the state's going to be paying that money for them to go to a private school. I say the opportunity is here for us to do something different.
So the blacks to take advantage of it.
What curriculum do we want? We should start talking about curriculum. How do we want our charter schools to look? Who do we want, who we got to put on this board? Who do we want the principals to be? What do we want from this?
That's an excellent point.
So that's me. I just think we gotta, our fight should be to make every opportunity we have look like what you've done with Jackson State University. This place is truly, truly remarkable from what it was 5 years ago, 10 years. I mean, it is. You have something here. Whatever you've done here, emulated throughout the state of Mississippi. You are on the right track. Miss Moody would be so proud. I mean, this place is working.
I got a master's in computer science here in '83, and I come back today and I can't recognize the place. It's changed so much for the better. I mean, the buildings, the surroundings, it is fantastic.
So all I'm saying with that is that there is some reason to take pause and to be afraid of what, but I don't want you to leave here thinking that it's all doom and gloom. Like, leave here with some sense of hope and responsibility for, we can do it here, we can do it throughout the state of Mississippi.
I want to direct some of that back to Jaleesa. Moody is particularly, and this is something that I think as a JSU student you should take personal, particularly critical of Jackson State during the Civil Rights Movement. And we can also have the perspective of a Tuloo professor at the time. When you read these descriptions of past leadership at the university and of students at Jackson State, and there was a distinction, I believe, between the students and the activist spirit of the students and a more conservative leadership, but Moody pulls no punches. She is very critical of JSU, Jackson State College at the time. What did you think when you read that? And what do you like to hear also from Dr. Garner about that as well?
Well, from my understanding of the environment at that time, I would have to agree with her and her assertion towards Jackson State, even though I wouldn't agree now. But it is a lot of conservatism. I do believe that by this being a state-run university, we do play the politics game. I'm a political scientist. I understand the role of politics is everywhere, but I believe that we do focus more on the politics or more on the economic outcome more so than the educational outcome. And I agree with him, but if we get so caught on the facade and the beauty of things, what are we really judging? And what I'm going based on that is that we see so many college students, so many of my colleagues are graduating with college degrees with no education, with no knowledge. So what are we really fighting for? Are we just fighting for the facade? Are we just fighting for the nice building or to say it's our own? Or are we fighting for that true equality, that educational equality? That educational equality is not equality based on how the building looks and how it's built and how it's run. It's based on the knowledge that we are giving our students and we're giving our children. Now that's something that we should try to emulate to that of success, not based on race, not based on class, but we shouldn't be focused on the finances of everything. And I think that's a lot of what's been main focus as far as education from what I gathered from my perspective. And so to kind of backtrack, no comment.
What was it about Tuloo that made it special, Professor Garner, and the critique that Moody has of Jackson State?
Should I read a little bit out of the book?
Sure, please.
Okay.
This is right after Medgar was killed. She's on the Jackson State campus trying to recruit students to participate in the demonstration. Here's what some of the Jews in one of the buildings on campus trying to get students to participate in this demonstration. It's a shame. It's really a shame. This morning, Medgar was murdered, and here you sit in a damn classroom with books in front of your faces pretending you don't even know he's been killed. Every Negro in Jackson should be in the streets raising hell and protesting his death. I said in one class, I felt sick. I got so mad with them. How could Negroes be so pitiful? How could they just sit and take all this shit without any emotions at all? Just didn't understand. It's hopeless booty. Let's go, Dory said. That story landed. She eventually ended up in Tuloo. As we were leaving the building, we began soliciting aloud in the hall. We walked past the president's office, shouting even louder. President Reddix came rushing out. You girls leave this campus immediately, he said. You can't come on this campus and announce anything without my consent. Dory had been a student at Jackson State. Mr. Reddix looked at her. You know better than this, Dory, he said. But President Reddix, Medgar was just murdered. Don't you have any feelings about his death at all? To me, that's kind of summarized the conflict. He was the president of JSU. He was a president, but he was an empty president. Now, in my days when this was going on, he was an Uncle Tom. He was, you ever hear the phrase, black on the outside, white on the inside? That's the way we felt about it. In other words, he was a white man in a black man's skin. He was Uncle Charlie. But now, I mean, I still say he behaved that way, but I also recognize that if he didn't behave that way, he wouldn't have been president anymore. So there's that tension. And both Dory and her sister Joyce had demonstrated at Jackson State. I don't think that's in the book, but they had, and they got expelled. I think they were permitted to finish the semester, but then they couldn't come back in the fall. So they came to Tuloo. And what a gift they were to Tuloo. I mean, talk about leadership. Talk about activism. I'll tell you, this is a personal story and a digression. I knew Joyce better than Dory. So my wife and I were members of Galloway Memorial Methodist Church at that time. We were in an attempt to reach out to the white community, because we lived on campus. We spent all our lives basically in the black community. And I should say we made some wonderful friends at Galloway, particularly Millsap's faculty. One day I decided to take Joyce to Sunday school with me. We got 3 feet inside the door before we got arrested and charged with disturbing worship and trespass. I have never understood how I could have been guilty of trespassing in the church of which I was a member. Now, of course, it didn't apply to Joyce, and Joyce has done great things. She's written books, she's gotten a doctorate degree. To me, that really was in her at Tuloo. She really showed that leadership. And somehow, when you're a student, as I reflect back on my students, those that took initiative, that did things that were kind of bad, as a matter of fact. Another incident at Tuloo, there were some Jackson State Tuloo students down here on your campus. I think it was 1966, and they were stuck here following a demonstration, and they couldn't get back to campus. And at Tuloo, we had an old bus, we called it the Blue Goose. And the administration wouldn't let them come down here. So what happened? 2 students got on that bus, I guess the keys were in it. They drove down here and they rescued the Tuloo students. You know who those 2 students were? Benny Thompson, our congressman, was one, and Constance Lorby Harvey was the second. She was the first black student They got a law degree from Ole Miss. I mean, when students take that kind of leadership, they become leaders in later life, I think. Now, poor Connie, she was punished. They were both punished. She couldn't walk. She got her degree. She had already been admitted to Ole Miss before this happened. She got her degree from Tuloo, but the administration would not let her walk and get her diploma on the stage, which was really hard because it really affected her family a lot, I think. And my wife talked to Penny Thompson last night. We were at an event that he was at, or recently, I don't know, and she asked him, and he was on social probation for a year. He was a junior at the time, she was a senior. So that was kind of the difference in the punishment. But my point is, you see leaders in college, they become leaders in adulthood. And I guess my second point is, I used to think things were so black and white. Oops, use the term, good and evil, or something like that. You know, there were the freedom riders, we were the freedom fighters, and then there were the Uncle Toms. And never two to me. That's an oversimplification. You know, everybody has a lot of pressures on them. And as a white faculty member too, I had freedom. I would go on that campus, and it was like an oasis in the middle of a desert. You could talk to anybody. You didn't have to, you know, wasn't like when I came to Mississippi and I had to decide, what am I going to do about these colored and white waiting rooms? Do I go in the white one and obey this terrible system? Do I go in the black one and are likely to get arrested? Do I sit in the bus and pee in my pants? I mean, what kind of choices are those? You don't have to worry about those choices anymore, but you still got choices to decide, what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going to spend your energy? How much are you going to line your own pocket? And how much are you going to help the poor? I think those are critical decisions you have to make.
I'd like to just add to this on a personal note. Joyce and Dory Ladner, when they were students at Jackson State, lived in our building in Air Hall, where the Margaret Walker Center and the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute and the Veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement are housed today. And so that's an incredible legacy for us to continue to lift up. And they certainly were the leaders, and there were plenty of Jackson State students who did engage the movement on their own terms. And another thing that was hit upon here that I think is interesting, and one of the things I think is beautiful about the book, is that Moody offers criticism of the movement that we don't always think about or talk about. She is extremely critical of Martin Luther King and his "I Have a Dream" speech. She is extremely critical of the Freedom Vote and of what happened during Freedom Summer with the Freedom Vote. There are critiques of the movement that we don't often hear about. I'm wondering, and Sean, maybe you can start talking about, your thoughts about that, and what she's really getting at what are underlying issues that aren't being addressed when, she criticizes Dr. King for his dreaming and not for actually what she saw us doing.
I mean, I guess that there is I understand that there's a sense of that, an idealist versus a realist, and we should, Medgar Evers's murder, we should take to the streets, or we should, we should be more active as opposed to dreaming and speaking. But I'm an idealist in lots of ways, and so that sort of, it resonates with me. I have a dream, Obama's speaking. But one thing I want to go back to, because it sort of, plagues me a little bit. The phrase Uncle Tom, and I certainly know what it means, but I recently read Uncle Tom's Cabin. I don't know if you guys have recently read it or not, but it is the most beautiful portrayal of a human. Tom himself is just like, in the end, he gives his life for a greater cause, for something that's much bigger than he is. And I'm saying, to be an Uncle Tom should, I don't know how it's taken on the negative connotation because the character in the book is basically the heroic slave who ends up laying down his life for the greater cause of the other slaves, so that everyone else can basically be free. So, does anyone know how that came to be? The Uncle Tom is
I don't know that I can answer that question, but I think there's some Uncle Tom in all of us. That we struggle between the Uncle Tom and the freedom rider, or the saint that Uncle Tom became, or something like that. And again, I'm going to repeat myself, it's not as simple. We're not one way or the other. We're kind of mixed up. We have part of it in both of us. One thing that you said kind of struck a tone to me when, at one point, she said, "I have found a cause for my life." And it sounds to me like she found a cause, he found a cause. And they both found that cause gave their life meaning. I mean, the cause of teaching physics, can you believe teaching physics at Tuloo and doing some civil rights work on the side, gave my life meaning. It still continues to give my life meaning. One small example of that, my current heart doctor is a former student of mine. So there's real joy and excitement in seeing those former students grow into PhDs, MDs, dentists, lawyers, scientists. You know, one of my former students is working for NASA on those space stations and so on. I mean, what more excitement can you have? And to be part of that cause, and I think he was part of a cause, she was part of a cause, even though, my sense, toward the end of the book, she felt it was almost a hopeless cause in some ways, and yet in other ways, there was definite meaning in it, huge meaning.
Jaleesa, as a student, how do you feel about kind of her critique of our more popular conceptions of the civil rights movement and this feeling of hopelessness that she comes away from the movement with?
I kind of agree with her little, her hesitation, or her critiques towards the movement. One in particular was the fact of the gender restrictions, and how she and that really kind of irked her, because she felt that she was just as good of a leader as anybody else. And so I think that gender issue was just really a big draw for her, and I would agree with her, definitely. Today, being a woman is still an issue in society, and so, like I said, it's those connecting the dots. Now this is something as a young black woman I should continue to fight on, trying to get equality for women. And this is a continuing struggle. So her critique basically kind of foreshadows the future and what we're facing now.
Well, that I agree with. I mean, she certainly felt that she was not treated as equally as the men in the movement, and that she worked equally as hard as she's been treated as their equals.
I agree also. Another personal story, I was at the Capitol today, and there were some visitors from Turkey and Azerbaijan. And one of the guys from Azerbaijan said, "You know, we're a democracy. We gave women the vote before you folks did in the United States." Boy, oh boy. So I think sometimes we as Americans have this sense of superiority, as though we've got the answers, and everybody should look to us for answers. Folks, in my opinion, we also need to look to the world for answers. And she was absolutely right. There's another whole area that really distresses me about the book, but I understand it, and that was the total lack of understanding by her family. They just could not comprehend her toward the end of the book. They were, her mom comes in and talks to her like a stranger. This was, her values and her system was just totally alien. They couldn't understand why she was doing this, why her actions here in Canton were putting her relatives in Coffeyville in danger. And the connections and the whole repression And how, you know, that's something that interests me, how out of a family of, I guess about 7 kids at the end, something like that, 7 kids, she could be so different. She was darn strong. I mean, she just understood something that she had a cause that nobody else understood. And the alienation, the suffering of her family for what she did. You know, I think of the suffering of black students in Madison County who first went to those white schools under what they call freedom of choice. Boy, and we know freedom in that choice. I mean, the economic repression that was there, if you made that choice, was huge. But somehow she listened to a different drummer, and it's really mysterious for me. But I'm really sorry about the suffering of her family.
In the interest of time and hopefully fielding some thoughts and questions perhaps from the audience, I'd like to ask each of the panelists just to offer kind of their closing thoughts about the book and the impact of it upon them, and to address whatever issues they think that we need to take home with us tonight.
For me, it was a wake-up call that despite how you grew up, whether you grew up with mom and dad, whether you had all the opportunities that your colleagues have, that you can make a difference in the world if you just commit yourself and make sacrifices. And I think that's what's keeping me through grad school.
For me, I will say that it was in lots of ways it reminded me of reasons I left Mississippi, sort of the hatred I felt for it, and it made me appreciate sort of the things that I feel are great about it now. And so I'd say it was sort of a double-edged sword for me. In certain ways, it made me think about reasons I didn't like it, and it certainly made me appreciate what it is I love about it now.
I guess I was struck by the pain and the commitment. Maybe those 2 things.
Thank you. Let's give our panelists I'd like to field maybe some comments and questions from the audience. If anybody would like to add anything. I don't know how long do we have, Dr. Mosley? Are we at 5 to 10 minutes? Would anybody like to add anything, add any comments, or ask any questions of our panelists? Back here, Dr. McManus.
Hello, everyone. And this is not necessarily a comment about something specific in the book, but I did want to share this. I found myself reading Coming of Age in Mississippi when I was actually, it was 1994. And I was actually living in Centerville and teaching in Woodville and wanted to get the book. And this is 1994, and what I realized is that in the public libraries, there was no copy of the book. In the high school in Woodville, there was no copy of the book, and in Centerville, in the middle school, no copies of the book. I couldn't get my hand on the book, even in that area in 1994. And I started thinking about the real serious social and political implications that this book had, if it had that effect. And I remember going to the library and asking about the book. And the librarian, one of them was African American, one of them was Caucasian, and both of them were just silent. Almost as if, I should have known that I couldn't get that book in Wilkinson County, even in 1994. So the impact of it was huge. So, I immediately had to get over to Macomb, which was about an hour away, and then I was about 50 minutes from Baton Rouge to get my hands on the book, reading it ravenously then at that point, because, what could be in here? And then my experience became more intensified, because I was reading about people who still live, whose families still live in the area. You remember the section where she talks about the children being burned in the house, and their last name was Taplin. Well, I had 2 Taplins in my classroom. You remember her talking about the Carters, the white family that owned most of the land that they were working for, and then they are now there weren't any fields that anybody was working in that the Carters owned, but now the factory was owned by Carter. So you had the second and third generations of those people who were still working for the same families. You moved from farm labor to manufacturing labor, but still, so the political legacy was still there. It was inherent, and it just struck me so seriously.
Thank you, Dr. McDaniels. Anybody else? Comments or questions? Well, one of our students here. Tasha.
Hi, just to speak to the comment about the activist spirit in today, searching for that. I think it's very important that we address that. You know, the civil rights movement has not ended, and a lot of people just don't think of it as a current issue today. But racism and the influences in our culture, it really just shape-shifted into an economic mass. Primary example, the school system that you brought up. So evident, just here in Jackson, you know, the local, you know, low-rated schools are suspiciously mainly black, you know, African-American students.
94%.
Right, suspiciously, right? Whereas the more affluent schools tend to be obviously Caucasian. I think speaking to that activist spirit, the apathy, the influences that created the apathy of today, I really honestly think that education system and the media have influenced that. Education system, you know, has created this system to where, you know, students are fed information to be tested, standardized tests, and they get in that behavior of, okay, I'm going to be tested on what's fed to me, and that's all I need to know. But self-education is so vital. There's a whole world of information that is suspiciously missing in the school system, and likewise in the media. You know, we're in a day and age where, you know, we see all these celebrities and these big things going on, and I think the youth feels that to impact on a broad scale, you have to be that big figure. And that's why I applaud Jackson State for the requirement of community service in order to graduate, because it's really encouraging that community mind of really impacting your immediate community. Because for things to change, that's where it has to start. So to really encourage change in the current civil rights movement, we really need to focus on self-education and our local communities. And that's...
Yeah, we're going to have time, I think, for one or two more comments. We have a couple of students back here who'd like to comment.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, please, Professor Garner.
The business about educating yourself and exposing yourself. I have a Swiss wife. She reads her Swiss newspaper in German every day on the internet. And she has a cousin who is 18. You know what he's doing? He's making artificial limbs because of his Swiss education. They turn out in 9 years probably about what we turn out as a sophomore in college. The competition worldwide is huge. Those kids, I mean, this guy, he's 18, he went through 9 years of public school, 2 years of kind of training, and here he is making artificial limbs at about 20. We have to work on our education system. I think you've got to remember you're going to be competing worldwide, so don't just focus on those textbooks. Teach yourselves, learn yourself, look at other things. You know, look at that worldwide thing. Those kids at 20, they're speaking 3 or 4 languages: French, German, Italian, and English. You know.
My name is Kat Hughes, and I'm a senior here at Jackson University. And I'll be honest, I have not read The Coming of Age in Mississippi yet. And I will also be honest and say that it's sad that it took it to be an assigned book to read, rather than a self-interest. But for the insight that was given here tonight, I will say that what I've learned just from what's been said is that it's not enough to be conscious and concerned. You have to be committed and really just, put forth the effort to be involved. I think our generation is more so concerned with the fact that, oh, well, there's nothing really to fight for, the movement is over. Yeah, but there's something to preserve for what's already been fought for, and we, are living in vain if we let the forerunners who did that, just let it slip away, and then we collapse back into this mindset of, the slave mentality, and that's not cool whatsoever. And so I'm thinking along the lines of the basis of sacrifice that you were mentioning, and Moody, and how she just was discerned with how people were not really moved at the fact of Medgar Evers' death. What do we do now? What do we do now? Our idea has been killed. Our figure, our leader has been killed. What do we do now? And so I think along the terms of sacrifice, as in she was willing to sacrifice what she could live without rather than what she was not willing to give up. There's a difference between somebody saying, I don't mind not being an astronaut because that's out of my interest, but when I'm not given the opportunity to be an astronaut, I think that's the terms along which sacrifice she was talking about. I don't want somebody to dictate to me what I can and cannot be. But same thing goes for us as voting. Those who don't vote don't have a voice. Those that do vote have a say-so into what is and what isn't. And so until it becomes something of interest to you, a matter, an issue, then we get more people that vote. But it should not take us to be a living example in order for those type of sacrifices to make us want to be a part of a movement. We should be along the terms of preventive movements, and preserving movements.
And I will say, I'm very proud of Kat. She's one of my students. She is reading Coming of Age in my class this semester. But also last summer at Jackson State, we had the great privilege of having 13 students from Brandeis University and a sociologist, Dr. David Cunningham. One of those Brandeis students is with us tonight. Kat was also one of our Jackson State students that worked with these Brandeis students. And the work they did was it being embedded in communities across the state of Mississippi, engaging the history of the civil rights movement on an intensely personal level. And the work they did was really, truly inspiring. And so there are things that are happening at Jackson State to reach our students on that level and to inspire them to continue to strive towards the things that Ann Moody was working towards. I got one more student coming here I want to hear from, and then we'll adjourn for the evening. Brett.
Hi, my name is Brad. I'm from Centerville, Mississippi, and my mom was a high school landlord. I want to speak to two things. First and foremost, I think the apathy that supposedly Jackson State showed during the civil rights movement. The majority of money that came to Jackson State was from the state. So if Jackson State students got into trouble, they lost their financial aid, and they couldn't go to school. So that's why Tuloo plays such a vital part in that. Also, a lot of Jackson State students would lie and say they went to Tuloo so they wouldn't have to suffer with those ramifications. And secondly, I would like to talk about how kids don't feel as if there's a movement going on in stuff today, because the movement really isn't in their face. It's taking place in Congress, it's taking place in legislative realms, things of this nature. There are no dogs attacking people, there's no sit-in signs and things like this. It's being done behind their back, although it's going on right in front of them. So you have to awaken yourself to this thing. So that's all.
Again, I'd like to thank the panelists. Do you guys have any final comments?
I'd just like to say I'm into that. I think, I mentioned that I was in the Mississippi legislature today, and they're passing bills that will affect us. It's kind of way out there. It's not so immediate. That's the way they work. That's the way they work, and there will be a consequence.
Sean or Julissa, anything you'd like to? All right, well, let's thank our panelists one more time. I have some plugs that I want to give to you guys for some events that we have coming up. March 20th in the JSU Student Center Theater, the story of Shirley Chisholm 72, Unbought and Unbossed, a documentary that I haven't had the pleasure to see yet, but I understand it is fantastic, and I can't wait to have that come to JSU. This coming Thursday, again, do not forget the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute's Medgar Evers Ella Baker Civil Rights Lecture Series, which we are very happy to be able to support through the Margaret Walker Center. This Thursday, 6:30 in the Masonic Temple, which is just down here on Lynch Street. And I do think that in terms of all of this discussion, it shouldn't be lost that the civil rights movement in Mississippi was essentially on the JSU campus with the NAACP office and the Masonic Temple, Medgar Evers' office, and the work, the COFO building, all of the work that was happening within 1 block of this campus. It is important to note. Also, it would be remiss if I didn't mention the campus reading community that you're at tonight. The next campus reading community event is Thursday, March 22nd, 2012 at 6 p.m. in the Charles F. Moore building at Jackson State. 6 o'clock, room 100 of the Charles F. Moore building. The book will be Lynch Street, the May 1970 shootings at Jackson State College, and we'll be very lucky to have the author of the book, Tim Spofford, here to join us for that campus reading community event. And also, I am told that as well to announce the 2012 Fannie Lou Hamer Humanitarian Awards Luncheon, a fantastic event that happens every spring. I hope you guys will buy tickets, buy a whole table from the Hamer Institute, and join the people who are going to be honored at the Hamer Institute are true inspirations to me and really to all of us. And so please come and join the Humanitarian Awards Luncheon. All right, I got 2 more things I'm told to add.
I've been told.
Just as a reminder, he's already mentioned about the Lynch Street book, and we just want to add a couple of plugs into that. Like we said, Tim Spofford, the author, will be here, and on that particular panel will include, we have Mr. Tim Spofford. We also have our graduate assistant student over here, Michael Morris. He's also going to be a part of that particular panel, and we're going to have some members of the class of 1970. Also that's going to be a part of this panel. And this particular discussion will also be leading up to our annual Gibbs Green event that's going to be coming up on April the 19th and the 20th. And so this is like a precursor to this event, which is going to be held, like I said, on April 19th and on April the 20th. On April the 20th, I would just like to say that the class of 1970 will also be a part of the Humanitarian Award Luncheon. And so we would like for you to all come back, be a part of this luncheon, celebrate Gibbs Green with us. And we're still planning this event. We still have some more things that are coming up. But I believe that this year for Gibbs Green is going to be one of the most spectacular, one of the best events that this campus has had in the past.